Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, or whatever the heck your time zone is at this moment. As you can see, it's a wonderful spring day here in Helsinki. It's May 2nd, so I shouldn't technically be wearing my student cap here, but I thought it kind of completes the fit for today, so I put it on. I'm once again recording on my microphone that still doesn't have a pop filter, so the wind might make the audio unbearable. If it does, then I'm sorry. I'll try to mix it in a way that makes it more pleasant to listen to. So I recently watched, I meant to check the name of the channel. I'm gonna put it right here on the screen and in the description, and maybe in one of those card things up top, if I know how to do that. I was watching a video on 1890s nostalgia in 1925, 1920s America, the gay 90s as it was called. It was a wonderful video, and it sort of made me start thinking about the times during which I too have kind of thought of the past, well, maybe more distant pasts, and being like, man, if only I was born, in like early 19th century Finland, and I could have been, I could have lived a pastoral life with my ancestors on the lakeside, or like, oh, if only I was born in, I don't know, Edo period Japan, as the white guys tend to, I don't know, fantasize about. Either way, there's a lot of there's a lot of discourse, a lot of ways in which people, especially nowadays, I think, mythologize the past, and I mean, this has been written about, and in the video too, it's been a thing since the ancient times. There's always been nostalgia for the past, but I think since nowadays we live in a world where the sort of like cultural zeitgeist is more or less shared around the entire globe, I think we're more aware of just how pervasive this way of thinking is. And it's not just personal fantasies and daydreams. It's sort of political movements these days are built on this nostalgia for something in the past. And that's a bee. I have a phobia of bees. Okay, it's gone now. So I was thinking about not just nostalgia for like when you were younger, but nostalgia for a time that you weren't really alive during. And I think it's that kind of nostalgia that oftentimes speaks of a mindset where it's you're alienating yourself from the time that you're really living in to create this sort of fantastical image of taking the you that was born now, that exists now, and placing it into an era that you don't know, because it's your imagination is peaked. What if I were a British explorer in the sort of late 19th century, at the height of imperialism? Oftentimes you're not really placing yourself in the shoes of the colonized or the poor or the otherwise oppressed or suppressed. In some ways you place yourself in the shoes of the greats of the time, the people who create this grand cultural narrative. But nonetheless, the idea is that you yourself, as you are now, would be placed in an earlier time, or you, this sort of mythical soul-like conception of yourself, is born in another time, and then you can imagine like you as you stand now, but just like with different clothes and with a more happier mindset, or more an assurance to what you're doing, your self-confidence, a great person, not this depressed or aimless or unsure creature of the 21st century, but a samurai with conviction and happiness, or a pastoral, a farmer with happiness, or a hunter-gatherer living in the times before civilization as we know it now, telling stories by the campfire each night, looking at the perfect starry sky where the cosmos were still unblemished by our artificial lights, sleeping in 2 4-hour sections each night, and then waking up at 2 a.m. to, I don't know, be creatively imbued, as that one sort of video talked about. But either way, you'll be happy. And I think that's really where most of this longing comes from. It comes from this idea that we're not meant for this time. We're not able to be happy in this time as we would be if we were born in a previous era. And you know, that's really what it is. It's the world around us that we're not made for. We were made for another time. And then, you know, you take that mentality and you examine it. And I think that's where you start to see some of the cracks in it. Because really, the point of this video is that no, you were made for this time. And in fact, not just made for this time, but you were made by this time. You could not exist in any other time or place. Because we, as people, we are created by the world around us as much as we create ourselves. Just psychologically, biologically, we are, you know, our self, you know, this experience of the self is a construct of the brain. And the brain, when it creates it, it's based on input from the world around us. You know, nothing inside you can come out of thin air. You know, you're a creature that sees the world, that experiences the world and reacts to it, makes decisions, you know, and then those decisions are weighed, predictions are made, you know, assumptions are made, you know, that's how the brain works, and the sort of end result of all this processing is you. But the fact is that what creates you is not an intangible soul that is somehow written into your genes. I mean, I think it's pretty clear by this point in our scientific understanding that genes don't determine who you are as much as they just, they determine a lot of things about your physiology, but like it's not really, doesn't determine you as a person. You as the psychological construct are born out of, you know, obviously some parts of you are more, you know, biologically determined, but certainly very little compared to what some people might expect, I think. And that's why when you think about being born in, let's say, you know, 1865, that wouldn't be you. Like even if you took somehow, you know, you took a literal clone of yourself, and they were born 150 years ago, it still wouldn't turn into you. And in fact, I don't think it would be anything like you. I think you might be, I think you would see that person at, you know, 25, 26 years old, as you, I don't know, however old you are now, and I think you would say, whoa, that's, because, you know, all of us would like to say, you know, oh, if I were born in the early 19th century, you know, I would be a part of the abolitionist movement, you know, obviously. I'm not racist right now. I'm a very tolerant person. I would be a tolerant person back then, but I'm gonna be real. I wouldn't place a lot of money on that bet, at least not for myself, because the things that have made me the way I am now it's all in the 21st century. I was born in 2001. I was a child in the 2000s. I grew up to be an adult in the 2010s, and now in the 2020s, I'm, you know, forming into the sort of person that, you know, I'm going to be, at least for the next while, as I, you know, finish my studies and start working properly and all that sort of stuff. It's like everything that I am, all of my personality traits, they're built by the era that I'm born in now. When I imagine the past, you know, when I have this fantastical daydreams of the ancient forests of pre-Christian Finland, or you know, court intrigue in you know, 500 BC China, or just 500 BC in general in Asia was kind of popping, because we had like Buddha, we had Lao Tzu, we had a lot of like interesting stuff happening in India and Nepal and China, and you know, like we have this imagination, or rather I have this imagination, and you know, it's 21st century imagination, it's values, it's thoughts being painted by the time that we live in now, you know. If I were actually living back then, or, you know, some close enough construct similar to me, I would probably be saying that, man, I wish things were more like in the past, or I wish they were more like, I wish we had things differently. Because Now I feel like I've read this in or heard about it, or just I'm aware of psychology enough to say that the human being, like we, well, I hope my phone doesn't fall over. We adapt to our situations very effectively when it comes to happiness, and there's no like linear progress of happiness. Rather, there's like our contentness and our ability to adapt to the times around us or circumstances of happiness. They're very context sensitive and relative to a degree. Like say people who lose a limb or otherwise become disabled. I think there was a study a while ago, like 10 or 15 years ago or before, that that said that like they would fairly soon reach the same levels of happiness that they had before because they adapt, and I think that applies to basically all of our circumstances. Well, not all of them, because obviously if you live in poverty, if you live in war, if you live under economic or political oppression and all these things, like, yeah, you're not going to be able to be very happy. But oftentimes the people who are nostalgizing for these bygone eras that they don't know, they're usually Western people like me, from middle class backgrounds like me, and I think at that point it's really important to realize that, okay, like this idea of the grass being greener in the past is built on my conceptions of today, my growth in this current epoch. And once you accept that you are a child of the current times, I think that's when you can bring your focus back to today and be like, okay, this is where we live. My happiness, my sadness, my grief, my pain, my successes, they are all beholden to today, and they are all possible to explore today. And that's when you change your mindset to focus on what can I do to actually be happy where I am now. Or maybe you can be happy where you are now. Do I want to move? Do I want to start a new hobby? Do I want to really search for who I want to be in ways that I haven't done before? And all of these things I think are far more productive than thinking about oh, I wish I were born in the 1920s and I could go to ragers every night, every day, or drink martinis with John Gatsby. I haven't read the book, but either way, when you take, and it's not just for yourself, but I think also society, when you think about moving away from this nostalgizing mindset, you become far more independent in your own thought, and then you might not be so easily swayed by well, obviously stuff like the MAGA movement or Japanese nationalism, or these things are kind of on the far end of concern for the well-being and safety of people around the world. But like also just marketing, for example, is just like you're more in tune with what you actually want to do now, instead of like thinking about these abstract concepts of a nicer past. And if you just buy this one thing, or if you just vote for this one person, or just like do this one thing, you can bring back that sort of past into your life. But even that's still just the present. It's still filtered through the present, and it's a product of the present. Nostalgia is still a product of the present, like you are. This turned into more of an incoherent ramble than I wanted it to. I feel like I had some actual thoughts I wanted to present, but they kind of got tied up in the ad hoc nature of this video. There's a duck and a crow down there. I don't think you can see them. The bedrock is in the way. Either way, the thesis is, I think you should imagine. I think it's fun to, and I think it's great for your understanding of history to really try to put yourself in those times and places around the world. But maybe expand that to be understanding of things that you might not, think about as so glamorous in your current, based on your current, perceptions of the world, like indigenous cultures or the global south, or these sorts of places, you know, try to go beyond, you know, like imperialist Europe, you know, and then, you know, think about your present day, you know, what can I do to be happy now? Do I want there to be change in the world? Ooh, what a thought. Maybe you could group up with someone who thinks similarly. Maybe you could advocate for something. Maybe you could do something in your community that brings more of that, more of something that you would like to see into the world. You know, these things, that's how we build the future. And also be aware that nostalgia and our understanding of the past, it's all a product of today, you know. You cannot imagine the past as it was back then. You don't know the past as it was back then. You know your own interpretations of history, you know, maybe stuff that was written back then, or ruins, buildings that were built back then, but nonetheless you are, you know, seeing it through modern lens, and that lens, if you're not aware of it, it can be distorted, and it can trap you in this feeling that there's nothing to be done today, when in fact everything is to be done today. In fact, there is nothing to be done that isn't today. Even your fantasies, your imagination, your sort of reminiscing, nostalgizing, it's all done today. So yeah, think about what you want to do, think about where you want to be, but always know that you are, you know, you could not be born at any other time, you know, it would not be you, you know. And that, I think, at the end of the day, at least for myself, it makes me happy to be alive right now. Instead of despairing at, you know, everything that's wrong with the world. There's always stuff wrong with the world. It's a work in progress. That's what civilization is. That's what humanity and life itself is. It's a work in progress, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to imagine. I'm happy to have so much knowledge online and in libraries and other people, young and old, to learn about other perspectives, other times, other places. And I wouldn't be able to have that in pretty much any other time in the world. I wouldn't have the friends I have. I wouldn't have the thoughts I have. I wouldn't have the personality that I have, my dreams, my values. And so, thank you, 21st century. There's a lot of things wrong right now, but hey, that's what we're here for, to make things better than or rather to leave things better than they were when we came here. So that's what I want to approach life through, you know, happiness to be alive, and a sort of eagerness to leave things better than they were when I came here. And I think we're doing that. So yeah, this will be the time that I say some zinger that ends the video, but I don't really have anything. Go outside, enjoy spring. See you next time.